We have to learn to be gentle with ourselves. Nothing good happens when we look at ourselves or even a part of ourselves or makeup and we bring shame or negative moral inventory to it. All things must be integrated into our story for them to ultimately be transformed and to belong. And there's an invitation for all things to be welcomed and integrated. Now, it doesn't mean I'm glad about the abuse. I can welcome the ways that I feel about it and that may be mixed and complicated. And if I can do that, then we have the potential to move through it to something deeper, into something wholer. What can't be welcomed cannot be ultimately integrated or transformed.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Broken to Beloved podcast. If you're looking for compassionate conversations and practical resources for recovery from and safeguarding against spiritual abuse, then this is the place for you. I'm your host, Brian Lee. As an ordained pastor and spiritual abuse survivor, I know what it feels like navigating life after spiritual abuse. I also know what it's like to want to prevent anything from happening to the people you know and love. It's why Broken to Beloved exists. And we need your help. Support our work by becoming a donor to help make our programs like this podcast possible. Just head to brokentobeloved.org/support or click the link in the show notes. Today, we're talking with Hunter Mobley about his latest book, Letting Go, Finding You, which explores the Enneagram's transformative power in helping individuals release limiting patterns and embrace their truest essence. Hunter is a gifted Enneagram teacher, author, attorney, and former pastor who brings deep insight and compassion to his work. He apprenticed under renowned Enneagram teacher Suzanne Stabile, who we love, and now teaches alongside her and her husband Joe Stabile at their teaching center in Dallas, Texas. Based in Nashville, Tennessee, Hunter combines his diverse professional experiences with a heartfelt approach to spiritual growth. And now, here's my conversation with our new friend, Hunter. Hunter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm so excited to join you.
Same. Right off the bat, we're here to talk about your book about the Enneagram and contemplative practices. And people who are listening may be wondering, what the heck does this have to do with me? Or why are we having this conversation at all? You and I spoke together a few weeks back. We were talking about how your book might be a good fit for our community and discovered a lot of common ground around the ideas of brokenness to wholeness, deconstruction, moving from rigid structures toward openness, our inherent belovedness. So I am genuinely excited for this conversation.
Well, I'm excited too. I love all those themes you just mentioned, but those themes are my love language. So I love that your podcast and your work focuses on those themes and excited to explore them with our conversation today too.
Same. You write openly in your book about your sexuality and your own process of reconciling that with the rigidity of your faith and maybe even your identity.
Yeah.
So for people who are listening and wondering, again, what does Hunter have to do with me? Or is he going to be speaking our language at all? Because I don't know what the Enneagram is and contemplation scares me.
Yeah.
Give us kind of, as Suzanne says, let's set the table a little bit.
Yeah.
And how did you get to where you are today? A little bit of whatever part of the story you're comfortable sharing with us that has led you to write this book and to do the work you do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brian. I love that question. And there's a lot of themes that we could kind of pull out and talk about. So just to give the short version of, I grew up in the church, like I'm sure a lot of your listeners and followers. So I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and I did it well. I was in Bible drill and youth groups and mission trips, all the things, choir tours, and ended up actually pastoring, kind of post-college, post even law school, ended up pastoring a church in more of the evangelical Pentecostal tradition, so not too different from the community that I grew up in. And during all of those years, kind of, really up until I was probably about, in my early 30s, I was working hard to do good things for God. I was working hard to understand who I was, what my place was in the world, how to integrate spirituality and religion and faith with my identity and sexuality that I wasn't totally comfortable for many of those years naming even to myself. And so I will say kind of one way that the Enneagram starts to come into all this is my deconstructing journey, which led to a faith deconstruction and then also identity awakening and naming and claiming for myself. In many ways, the Enneagram was a tool for me in the earliest days of that journey. I was at a very conservative religious retreat in Florida, in Boca Grande, Florida, with a lot of very wealthy people and very conservative politically and spiritually people. And I was seated at a table next to Joe and Suzanne Stabile, who I'd never met before. Didn't know them, didn't know the word Enneagram, didn't know anything about them, but we were just seated at the table together. We were all sort of interlopers in this event. None of us really belonged, but somehow we had just found our way here, and they were speaking and sharing some with this group. And so I'm sitting next to them, and just over the course of potatoes and chicken, we're doing the who are you and where do you live and what are you about? We get to know each other a little bit. Early friendship forms just at that dinner table. That was the first dinner that I heard the word Enneagram. And through that friendship that emerged, we stayed in contact. We began seeing one another when we would travel in cities where we were near each other. And through that, organically, I started to learn about this tool that Suzanne speaks about. Later, I started to learn more about the contemplative side of spirituality, which really Joe teaches about. Now, Joe and I teach together, actually, that discipline together. And so all of this begins out of relationship for me, which of course is so connected to my Enneagram number. I'm an Enneagram 2. We're relationship people, but there's sort of a way will open theme to it all, a God bless the broken road theme to it all, a relationship theme to it all, that really deconstruction for me, healing for me, self-actualization, Enneagram work, and even contemplative work. All of those things really intersected at the same time in my life, and they all animated one another. So it's hard for me to actually piece out the individual pieces, which is why, Brian, this book that we're talking about that I wrote, Letting Go, Finding You, that just released this year, it's funny, my publisher at one point said, okay, I can't tell if you're writing a memoir or if you're writing an Enneagram book or if you're writing a book about spiritual practice. And I said, perfect. I don't know between those three what I'm writing either, because really all three of those things, my personal story and its evolution and development and maturing, along with my understanding of the Enneagram and my access points and finding different ways of expressing spirituality, particularly through the contemplative tradition, all of those themes came together, and they do come together. And that's what I wanted to do, and hopefully did in this book, is share that your story and the Enneagram and a contemplative approach to spirituality, if we combine and put all of those themes into a soup pot together and mix them up, there is something really beautiful in the opportunity for transformation that can emerge. And so the book explores the intersecting points between our story, the Enneagram, and a contemplative approach to spirituality. And really, it's born out of experience for me, because all three of those themes came together at one particular juncture in my life. And now I'm unable in many ways to say which made the difference on this day and which made the difference on that day and which led to this. I can just say that those have come together for me. And that's why I'm passionate about integrating, particularly the Enneagram and contemplative spirituality, as one discipline rather than separate and distinct disciplines.
That's good. I will look for any excuse I can to talk about our values. And one of them, we just renamed it. It used to be dignity over dogma. And now we're calling it relationships over rigidity. And I love the title of your book, Letting Go, Finding You. And there's two quotes I want to read. One is that if there had been steps to follow to overcome my gayness, which I now see as something to celebrate rather than overcome, for most of my life, I would have given everything that I had to discover them. But the change never came. Instead, change occurred in me when I exchanged my 5-step spiritual programs for a process of surrendering and letting go.
Yes.
And then you also write that whatever you have tried to will and work away through a rigid spirituality that demanded active attention to steps and methods and predictive outcomes didn't work all that well.
Yes.
And I think that's what draws me. And I think hopefully that's what will draw the listeners, is this idea like we've tried so hard to make faith work. We've tried so hard to find approval or affirmation or belonging in our faith communities, or maybe even with God.
Yeah.
And I love this idea that it's not in trying harder or holding on tighter, but in letting go.
It's in letting go. You're so right. The journey is in, not out. It's really, and that's what we miss so much in even spiritual and religious conversations, is we have this sense that it's our responsibility to work and will our way to God or to the holy or to change even of ourselves. We have very little ability to make any kind of change in ourselves. Our pathway really is about letting go and opening up and surrendering. It's, Father Richard Rohr, who I love and is really an Enneagram mentor, he describes 2 different postures to life: the posture of willfulness and the posture of willingness. And he says that at every juncture of our day, we have the choice to pick up willfulness or willingness. And I will say that for most of my life, my spiritual approach was picking up this willfulness. I was going to do great things for God. I was going to fix myself. I was going to figure out the steps and read the book and go to the conferences and, get from A to Z. And the problem is sometimes in a micro way that works, in little ways where, okay, well, today was a better day than yesterday, or I was able to make this small change in my life. But it's almost like we have to keep feeding the beast. Well, but now we need a new book, and now we need another conference. It often brings a change that doesn't last, or that's not truly transformative. And so what I discovered in my own life, and this is really the mystery and the secret that's revealed within both the Enneagram and within contemplative spirituality as a spiritual posture, is that when instead of taking on, we let go, what we do is we allow things that are more core and more true to be revealed. Maybe that were hidden, maybe that were protected or buried even from ourselves. So when I talk, Brian, about the Enneagram, what I want to encourage people to know is your number, your personality, your Enneagram type, it is not the truest thing that could be said about you. It is the mask or the adaptation or maybe even the projection that you wear in order to protect yourself from the world. And that's great. We all need that. It's like we need raincoats when it rains. We need some protection from the world and the school of hard knocks, which is what we're all existing in. And so we build these personalities that help us. But we build them so well and we become so accustomed to them that we forget that actually those personalities were protecting some deeper, truer things. And we lose touch with those deeper, truer things. And we become enamored with our personalities, believing that that's the truest story about ourselves when it's not.
Yeah.
And so what my goal is with the Enneagram is if we can loosen our hold on personality, release personality in some ways, that as it begins to fall away, that there is something that's always been there, something of the soul, something of the true self. In this book, I specifically describe it as the virtues, as your particular core virtue. It's just waiting to be re-revealed and remembered and recovered. And so that's why all these things that we're talking about, Brian, from our own personal deconstruction to the Enneagram to contemplative spirituality, they all hit on the same idea of let's let some of these layers fall away that we have built up, all this bulk, so that maybe something that is truer can actually shine through, maybe even something that we've forgotten about.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And so the Enneagram, this whole system and framework that sets up 9 distinct types, most often identified just by their numbers, 1 through 9, but often given names, and everyone has different names for all of them, right?
Yes.
That gets to the core of what motivates us in the ways that we think, act, and feel.
Yes.
We so often identify ourselves and our type by what we feel is the worst thing about us.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so I love that while you don't minimize those passions, you gently invite us and point us to see and embrace those virtues that you referenced.
Yes. It's funny. On that, Brian, I'll say that Suzanne and I have experimented before with teaching the 9 types by only talking about the best iterations of each of those types, and people love it and they don't learn their number.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, it seems that part of what it means to be human is to know ourselves more by what we get wrong than by what we get right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a custom of focusing on the things that we get wrong. And many times, you're right, when we learn about our own Enneagram numbers and when we talk about them or describe them, we often think about them in the ways that they get things wrong. But ultimately, that's not the truest story.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm coaching, one of the ways that I use to set it up and to explain the Enneagram is to offer these 9 different reflections of God, that they are distinct, they are different, they are completely different from each other, and yet you need all 9 of them to get a full picture of who God is in the world.
Yes.
And it paints these beautiful, glorious things of like perfection and omniscience and loyalty and goodness and unity. And people kind of walk away feeling warm and fuzzy, but they, like you said, they have no idea which one they identify with most.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not until you get to those core weaknesses or passions or things,
right.
And at the same time recognizing another one of our values, goodness over depravity, or goodness over, like we were Genesis 1 theology of we were created and God said very good, versus a Genesis 3 theology that says I am a lowly worm and completely depraved and wicked. It's like, yes, the passions are there, but the virtues were there first.
Exactly. That is one of the greatest messages to tell. And it's so interesting. It's one of the things that we forget the most often, don't we?
Yeah.
And that's this book really, the reason why I wrote this book was to relink the passions and virtues. It's funny, if you do a lot of Enneagram work, Brian, you'll notice people know their passion.
Yeah.
They hear it. They see it. If you go to a Know Your Number seminar or read an introduction book about the Enneagram, usually one of the first things that you'll learn about each particular number is the passion. When I start talking about the virtues, many people say to me, gosh, I don't think I've heard about the virtues. What are the virtues? Mm-hmm. Well, originally, the passions and virtues were one united discipline, and they were never meant to be discussed as 2 separate distinct systems or 2 separate distinct thoughts. Unfortunately, through the years, we have lost the integration of talking about the virtues when we talk about the passions, but they're one discipline. And the way that you really see that hiding in plain sight is they're opposites of each other. So I'm an Enneagram 2. My passion is pride. Well, my virtue is humility. Well, those are just 2 sides of the coin. Mm-hmm. We could go through all the 9 types and see that they're opposites of one another. And then once you reunite the passions and the virtues, what's there for you to discover is exactly what you just said, Brian, that virtue was first.
Yeah.
Virtue was first. But virtue was so precious and vulnerable and true that we learned to protect it.
Yeah.
And what we often do as humans is we think that we are protecting something by its opposite. So it's like, what would be the surest way that they would not think I'm scared today? Well, I'll pretend to be really, really brave. And so we do that with our virtues. And so we have projected the opposite of the virtue, which is the passion. And we started doing it so young, and we did it so often and so well that we ourselves forgot we were doing it. And we ourselves began to believe that we were fundamentally passion, not virtue. And our spiritual work is to unlearn that and do exactly what you described, of return to the Genesis 1 way of seeing our true selves as it all begins in virtue.
Mm-hmm. Let's just do this with virtues, because like you're saying, I don't think many people have an understanding of what that means. And I think in the broader sense, what we are constantly trying to communicate at Broken to Beloved is this idea that beloved is your core identity, not broken. That brokenness is something that happened to you, but it's not who you are.
Yes.
And as it goes with these passions and with these virtues, passion is something you identify with, but it's not who you are at the core. It's this virtue. And I think it gives a much more specific lens for people who are listening beyond the belovedness, which they may not quite understand or grasp yet, that there may be something much more specific because of their type. Would you walk us through the 9 virtues?
Absolutely.
And passion, since they do go together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Enneagram 1s are familiar with their passion of anger, but their virtue is serenity. We've got an Enneagram 1 over here, Brian, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Anger and serenity. So, anger is, Enneagram 1s are accustomed to it, and often it looks like resentment versus kind of straight up anger. But serenity is this peaceful, non-dual presence. The idea that everything belongs in its measure. Everything is complete in its own way. Serenity. Enneagram 2s, pride and humility. So humility is the virtue and pride is the passion. And so pride for Enneagram 2s is all about sort of a pride of place and position in someone's life. So I'm the fixer, I'm the rescuer, I'm the savior, depend on me. How in the world could you do without me? That's kind of the fundamental pride that's in Enneagram 2-ness. But the virtue of humility is the ability to say, you know what? Some days I'm not the one who has the answer. Some days I'm the one who needs an answer. Some days I'm not the one who can help. I'm the one who needs to be helped. And I can acknowledge and name my own personal needs, and I can receive help and love and belovedness from you, from someone else. For Enneagram 3s, the passion is deceit and the virtue is truthfulness. And the deceit is all a self-deceit. It's not, Enneagram 3s aren't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. They have lost touch with who they really are at their core. And so they are reinventing themselves according to whatever context they're in. And so they've deceived themselves by believing they are whoever they have become to be successful in their current context. And truthfulness as the virtue is about a recovery of true sense of personal identity, calling, vocation, and a rediscovery of who you really are, not whether or not it works or belongs in this context. You are you. And it may be successful in this context or it may not, but you are fundamentally determined to be you regardless. For Enneagram 4s, the passion is envy, and the virtue is equanimity. Enneagram 4s are kind of a special number, so they get a special word. They get a $20 word for their virtue. But envy is all about that sense that maybe other people have a life that's a little bit easier than theirs. Maybe other people are not missing so many things. Maybe other people get to kind of be normal while they sort of feel out of place. And equanimity is this state of being where you feel perfectly content that everything belongs in its measure and everything is complete, nothing is missing, everything is whole, everything is in perfect balance. And that's fundamentally who Enneagram 4s are people of deep contentment and balance. But they've lost touch with that, and the passion of envy has set in. Enneagram 5s, the passion is greed, and the virtue is non-attachment. And so greed is about a grabbing up of time and energy and information and resources and knowledge. But non-attachment is about moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mentality. This idea that I can hold open-handedly all of my resources, my time, my knowledge, my energy. And if something is taken from me, then I trust that there will be more when I need it to fill my hand back up. This kind of non-attached way of expressing yourself and of gathering and grabbing up the things that you think you need. Enneagram 6 is the passion is fear and the virtue is courage. And, Enneagram 6s, the fear comes in usually as more of kind of a latent anxiety that's just always present, a sense of, what might go wrong, what needs to be accounted for, what they ought to think of. And courage is it's not about, standing up to the bear, doing something reckless or running into the fire. Courage is about trusting your own inner guidance to make it through all of life's tricky situations and not having to go outside of yourself for answers. Because, see, Enneagram 6 is often in their passion, they feel like they don't have the answer, so they need to go outside of themselves to help get reassurance or make the plan or ask the question or find the answer. And courage is about trusting your own inner guidance. Mm-hmm. For Enneagram 7s, the passion is gluttony and the virtue is sobriety. And gluttony for Enneagram 7s is about a insatiable desire to have more experience and more excitement and more new. That's what gluttony typically is for 7s. And sobriety is the ability to savor and to be satisfied with something that may be very mundane or very simple, but you can still be satisfied by it and can savor it and not need something more or new or extra. This sober living is something that Enneagram 7s are invited to recover. It's connected to really who they truly are, but they have lost touch with it. And they have fallen into patterns of gluttony. For Enneagram 8s, the passion is lust and the virtue is innocence. And lust for Enneagram 8s as a passion is really about trying to gather up experiences and feelings that are very intense and intimate. And Enneagram 8s feel in many ways like if it wasn't intense, it wasn't intimate. That's what I hear from Enneagram 8s a lot. There's kind of I'm looking for spark plugs. That's what Enneagram 8s tell me. Well, in a sense, is the ability to reconnect with the inner child within. Enneagram 8s hate to do inner child work, but it's the gold for them. It's the ability to connect with the inner child within, to be able to be surprised, to be able to connect with softer, tenderer feelings, not just with things that are turned up or turned on or intense. And then Enneagram 9s, their passion is sloth, but their virtue is action. And sloth for Enneagram 9s is really about their desire to be unaffected by life. And many times they're busy doing, but they're doing to give themselves permission to not get to things that may cause conflict or may feel like they're very hard to get to. And action is about just doing the few things in a lifetime that only you can and must do, regardless of whether they disturb or disrupt your inner peace or your peace between you and someone else. So it's sort of, I tell Enneagram 9s all the time, the absence of conflict does not mean the presence of peace. Enneagram 9s are often avoiding conflict, thinking that it's preserving inner and outer peace. But what action invites, which is the virtue for 9s, is it invites a recovery of forward movement that has the potential for inner and outer conflict, but it's necessary for Enneagram 9s to propel their lives forward and to do their work in the world. And so that's just a flyover of the passions and virtues. But what I hope people really will take in on that is noticing how they're opposites of one another. And what that reveals to us is that whatever you think about your number and who you are as an Enneagram 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever number you are, at the core of the core of the core, your virtue is a reflection of the opposite of that. And so we are the opposite of who we've come to know ourselves to be. Now that's a weird word salad, and we have to sort of sit with that, and we have to wrestle with that, and that doesn't just, we don't sort of feel comfortable with those words in a day. We have to do some work around those. But if we will at least entertain that idea that you are virtue, not passion, then we've really got some potential for transformation.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. And I mean, you're right that false in the language of the Enneagram does not carry moral weight. That false
Exactly.
doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean
Yes.
evil. It doesn't even mean untrue. And in bearing with your semantics, false just means the opposite of
It
true.
just means the opposite.
And I love your reframing of the passions as passion and not sin. Because we often hear this story, Evagrius Ponticus writes out these 9 passions. Pope Gregory recategorizes them as 7 deadly sins. And the language of sin has been so weaponized for so many people in this community that hearing that not as a sin, not as something bad or wrong, but as a mask that hides your truest self. That passion, the root word, comes from suffering. It is a thing that you will suffer with for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
And it's not the truest thing about you.
Exactly. And we have to learn exactly like what you're describing, to be gentle with ourselves and to, know nothing good happens when we look at ourselves or even a part of ourselves or makeup and we bring shame or negative moral inventory to it. All things must be integrated into our story for them to ultimately be transformed and to belong. So I think we are invited to say, wow, our passion has been the way that I have made my path through this world. Thank you. that it has helped me, and it has hurt me in some ways and limited me at many times, and it has caused me to miss some things. But it's not bad or evil. Like what you said, it's an adaptation. It's a mask that I wear.
Yeah, it's a strategy. And
it's
I think
a strategy.
It also lines up so much with the frameworks that we use, whether it's IFS work, whether it's, any of this stuff that in the naming or in the noticing. So I often talk about notice, name, and navigate. If I can notice the thing that is causing my suffering, if I can notice the strategies that I use that have gotten me this far, but at this point are now holding me back, give it a name to say that what I'm usually doing is anger and resentment. And it's just masking all these other things because I think everything is wrong with the world.
Yeah.
And if I can move toward that sense of serenity and acceptance of those pieces without needing to judge or put moral value on my anger, which I was taught was bad and wrong and therefore should avoid at all costs.
Right.
It gets us so much further than the denial or dismissing of these things that are always going to be with us anyway.
It does. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's so much more welcoming and invitational than it is a hammer being brought down on us of, you have to do this thing.
Oh, you're right. One of the things that in this book, I talk about even welcoming prayer as a contemplative spiritual discipline. And there's an invitation for all things to be welcomed and integrated. Now, it doesn't mean we don't say, I'm glad about the cancer or I'm glad about the abuse, but we do have to welcome our experience of it long enough to integrate it into the story and say, okay, this belongs as part of my story, and I can welcome that.
Yeah.
And I can welcome the ways that I feel about it and that may be mixed and complicated. And if I can do that, then we have the potential to move through it to something deeper, into something wholer. What can't be welcomed cannot be ultimately integrated or transformed.
That's it. And I had that whole passage highlighted because it felt so helpful, especially I think for those of us who may have heard or received spiritually bypassing language that tries to explain away those difficulties, hardships, illnesses, griefs, natural disasters, that use that language of, I love the way you said it, God is not behind the hurricane, he is in the hurricane. He's not behind the cancer, but he is in it. And just this reframing of that kind of language that helps us to understand more clearly, or maybe just more openly, the nature of what that is. So when we talk about a contemplative movement, when we talk about contemplative practices, contemplation in and of itself may seem really mystical, very woo-woo, or even scary for people who are coming out of rigid or high control environments. So help us demystify what being contemplative means.
Oh, well, thank you. Contemplative spirituality and a contemplative practice is really any practice that is about letting go versus taking on. Anything, when I think of a contemplative practice, I think any act that I do, any practice that I do, where I bring this intention, Brian, to that act or practice, to be totally open to the presence and activity of God. If I bring that intention to working a jigsaw puzzle, to taking a walk this afternoon, to sitting on the floor and playing with my 4-year-old corgi named Henry at home, I can be having a contemplative moment. It's about presence. It's about attention and intention. It's about letting go of results and not having to control the outcome. So when we talk about contemplative practices, many of them do involve things like silence or stillness or solitude. Now, it's not all just about being quiet. We can walk a labyrinth and be in a contemplative act. We can go on a pilgrimage and go walk the Camino, and that can be a contemplative journey. We can take our bodies with us in those places, but what we're doing is we're letting go of control. We are focusing our attention on the thing that we are doing, and we are setting our intention on the unseen work of the Holy One, the unseen work of God in us that is out of our control and that is beyond our control. And so anything can be contemplative. Now, we all have sort of our connotations of maybe what that means, and sometimes we think, oh gosh, only monks or nuns, or, those are people really doing contemplative things. And certainly there are contemplative practices like centering prayer, or, like fasting, or, that seem kind of traditional or classically contemplative or classically Christian. But it's really more of a posture than it is a series of acts or practices. So anything can be contemplative if we bring our attention and our intention to it, and we let go of the results, and we trust the process to the holy. It's a whole posture change, and it's really just in opposition in a way to what I would describe as active spirituality, which is what I was involved with so much of my life, which was kind of that idea of, I'm going to figure out the steps, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make the change, and I'm going to work real hard. Contemplation is just really coming in the opposite spirit of that. And so that's why it's about letting go, not taking on. That's why it's about subtracting, not adding. That's why it's about less, not more. And so it's truly, Brian, a posture that people can develop more than it is about, here are the 8 contemplative practices that you must know and master to, quote, be a contemplative. It's none of that. Yeah. It's really about a way of showing up in the world, of letting go and opening up.
Yeah. I have 2 responses. The first one is just, I love, again, how invitational that feels. And I think, again, for people who are coming out of rigid or high control environments, who are constantly being told or thinking that they just have to do more or try harder, that this is a surrendering, that this is a letting go, it's doing less, that it is an intention and a posture, not a series or list of things that I need to do.
Yes.
And I also love that right at the beginning of that section where you talk about the origins of the contemplative movement and the monastic movement, the people we call the desert mothers and fathers, that is a reaction and response to seeing institutionalized religion, power, excess, potential for corruption, empire, all of that stuff. And so I think for people who don't know where they are with their faith anymore, for people who don't feel like they fit in an organized religion or don't know how to feel safe going to a church, that contemplative practices can be extremely invitational and safe to engage in because it's not a set of rules or behaviors, but just a mindset that you approach playing with the dog, going on a walk, preparing your dinner, Brother Lawrence, washing dishes, all of these things. I hope it serves as a really good resource for people who are looking for some entry point to hold on to their faith in some kind of a way, but don't know where to go looking. That contemplative is not something scary. It's not something weird and out there. It is extremely accessible.
It is. I love that. That's a beautiful way that you describe it. You're right, because the earliest people who gave us some of these postures and practices that now we think of as contemplative, they were leaving the city and going out into the margins and going out into the out of the way places and trying to live in simpler ways with more connection to themselves, to other humans, and to the holy, outside of the excesses of religion and empire and church tradition. And so I think you're exactly right that there's something especially invitational about contemplative spirituality to people who have experienced brokenness or loss or rejection in the context of institutional Christianity. There is something really beautiful and invitational about contemplation for us.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a whole list, I think, chapter on contemplative practices that you can try on for yourself, and we won't go through them, so you have to go get the book to do it. But there are so many invitations to engage in contemplation for yourself, and there is no right or wrong way. You try it on, and if it works for you, great. And if not, try a different one.
Yes.
I love that you write about returning to a small self. And there's this little passage: I cannot overemphasize the temptation to return to small self and put away the work of transformation. A soul that is open to all its truest truths is capable of being abused, misunderstood, wounded, and ridiculed, and transformation often feels very costly. People have come to love you and know you by the features of your small self, which I think is so true for so many of us here. And the moment you stop following your old script, many of the people who love you the most will ask you what's wrong, and when the old you will be coming back. That rang so true, because I think so many people who have experienced spiritual abuse and carry religious trauma, we have learned to make ourselves small.
Yes.
And so this invitation into that work of transformation, embracing true self and reclaiming agency, is such a huge part for me of what this book was.
Yes. Oh, thank you for those words. It's kind of a test to me, Brian, of sometimes when I recognize in myself that I am like feeling the need to turn back and almost return to chapter one. It's sort of like, whoa, I need to kind of go back to a place of maybe familiarity or what felt like safety, because it was known. Many times that's the clue that we're actually on the verge of something really transformative, because there is always that pull when we're sort of walking into a larger room. There's always that pull to sort of step back across the threshold into the smaller room that is known and that's familiar and that's welcomed and that everybody that you know and love is accustomed to. But there's always a deeper invitation to keep going. Yeah. It's mysterious, it's unknown, it's uncertain. It feels liminal in many ways. It feels, expansiveness. We kind of like boundaries. We sort of like control, and we're sort of oriented that way in many ways in our humanity. And but the spiritual invitation is always to open up and to go deeper and to keep moving.
I love all of that. Hunter, if people are looking to engage with you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram and Facebook as Enneagram Hunter, and they can find me on my website, enneagramhunter.com, and that gives some information about where to find me and where I'll be next. And I love getting to meet people on the road at events and places, so I come check it out and see where I am and come say hello.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Everyone go get a copy of Letting Go, Finding You, Uncover Your Truest Self through the Enneagram and Contemplation, wherever books are sold. We'll provide links for all of the things in the show notes. Hunter, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Brian. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Such important, beautiful work in the world.
I loved that conversation. I just enjoy talking to Hunter so much. If you enjoyed it as much as I did, be sure to follow Hunter and say thanks for being on the show. You can find links and all the things in the show notes. Subscribe or follow the show to get new episodes automatically. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review or share with your friends. It really helps us to grow and continue providing quality content for you. And a special thank you to our listeners who make this show possible through their financial support. Consider donating today at brokentobeloved.org/support or at the link in the show notes. This episode was hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Lee. Editing by Heidi Kritz and post-production by Lisa Carnegas. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope it's been helpful. Here's to moving toward healing and wholeness together. I'll see you next time.